Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We'll begin the 25th Congressional Campaign Forum here in just a few minutes as we allow everyone to get logged on to our system. So we'll begin in just one moment. Thank you. All right, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is John Musella. I'm with the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce, and we are pleased to host the only Congressional Candidate Forum for the 25th Congressional District's May 12th special election, which is being conducted with all vote-by-mail ballots. We thank you for joining us today for this unique virtual forum format. I'm coming to you from my home in Santa Clarita, and each of our candidates today are located at their own separate locations, as is our moderator. While we've done some test runs to prepare for today's forum, please bear with us if we have and experience any technical issues. As you know, the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce serves as the voice of business, representing the business community in the third largest city in the county of Los Angeles. The SCV Chamber is the leading pro-business advocacy organization in the Santa Clarita Valley for our 65,000 member workforce. The SCV Chamber takes an active role in shaping legislative policies in support of businesses. We represent our members before local, regional, state, and federal governmental agencies and provide an open forum for our members to develop policy positions that directly impact our business community. During this COVID-19 pandemic, the SCV Chamber has been offering our entire business community regular and timely updates on emergency funding opportunities, current events, and numerous webinars. I encourage you to visit our website, scvchamber.com, to learn more about all of our upcoming webinars, including our new series called Scaling Up Back to Business, that we are doing in partnership with the SCV EDC. Today, the SCV Chamber once again takes pride in hosting a nonpartisan business issue-related forum to bring all of you the necessary information you need for the upcoming special election. With that, I would like to introduce our moderator for this afternoon's forum. Jeffrey Forrest serves as Vice President of Economic Development at College of the Canyons for Chancellor Dr. Diane Van Hook. Given Jeff's career background working with our business community, we felt he was a solid choice to serve as today's moderator. Jeff is also a member of the SCV Chamber Board of Directors and is familiar with business-related policy issues. Our moderator, Mr. Forrest, is coming to us from his home in Santa Clarita and will remain off camera today to ensure our focus is on our candidates. Jeff, I'm going to now turn the forum over to you. It is all yours.
Thank you, John. Assemblywoman Christy Smith and candidate Mike Garcia, thank you for joining us for today's forum. Given the current pandemic known as COVID-19 and the economic fallout from this crisis, the state of our local businesses and the economy is weighing heavily on the hearts and minds of our voters, and they are eager to hear from both of you. With that in mind, here are the rules of today's forum. We ask that both candidates refrain from personal attacks, stay on topic, and respect the time of the other. You will both have 2 minutes for opening statements before the question and answer period begins. I will inform you when you have 30 seconds remaining. During the question and answer period, each of you will have 2 minutes to answer the same question. I will also inform you when you have 30 seconds remaining. After both of you have responded, there will be a 1-minute rebuttal from the one who addressed the question first. At the end of the question and answer period, each of you will then have 2 minutes to give concluding remarks. With that said, let's begin with opening statements. Assemblywoman Christy Smith will go first, and then we will hear from candidate Mike Garcia. Assemblywoman Christy Smith.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you for moderating. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting today. I'm a proud member of Santa Clarita Chamber, as is my husband. We've had a great working relationship over the years, and I just want a big shout out to you and the entire team. I really appreciate everything that you've done for our local business community during this crisis. The information has come quickly, daily. The updates and the access to all the support and the services that folks need is changing day to day, but you've done a wonderful job in delivering that to the community. Hello to all of you who have logged in from all over the 25th Congressional District in the country. I know we have some press joining us today. My name is Christy Smith. I currently serve as the Assembly member for the 38th District, which is about 58% of California's 25th Congressional District. Prior to having the honor of being elected to that post, I served 9 years on the Newhall School Board, and those were an amazing 9 years of public service in this community, although a lot of it was challenging through the hardest part of the recession. We made, really wise choices to defend our jobs against that crisis and still maintained our excellent standing, like all of our local school districts here, being one of the top achieving districts in the state. And moving on from the Newhall School District, as I said, I'm now currently the California State Legislator representing about 58% of this district. I had a very successful first year in the state legislature, and proud to say that all of the bills that I authored and had signed into law had the focus of two things. One, they were good governance bills, or they made life better for all of us and brought back a lot of financial investment to the local district, including for our college and our senior center. So looking forward to a great conversation today.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Christy Smith. And now we'll hear from candidate Mike Garcia.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey and John and the rest of the chamber for hosting this, and all the folks on the line. Thanks for joining this. I hope everyone is staying safe and staying healthy. This is an absolutely critical election that we have going on right now, and appreciate you all paying attention. It's critical for a couple of reasons. One, for 7 months, we've had no representation at the federal level in the House of Representatives. That's a shame. We deserve better than that, and hopefully we can get back to the House here with a good representative in a matter of weeks. And then obviously with the crisis going on at the national level with the COVID-19, we need to really ensure that who we're electing to these types of offices have the background and the experience necessary. This isn't a Republican versus Democrat thing. This is about survival. This is about survival for our nation. It's about survival for us as Californians to be able to continue to survive in this state with some of the highest cost of living, and frankly prevent the blunders and unintended consequences of things like AB5 and high taxes from hindering our nation. The country needs leadership. The country needs world experience right now more than ever. You probably all know that I'm a Navy fighter pilot, flew F-18s for the U.S. Navy for about 15 years, flying combat missions into Iraq from aircraft carrier operations. Moved back here to the district, been in the district since 1983, and moved back here in 2009, coming out of the military, serving in the private sector for a large aerospace company where I was had the honor and privilege of leading a $7.5 billion portfolio and about 140 employees. So an absolute thrill to be involved in this. I believe in low taxes, free market capitalism, the Constitution, competition, and above all things, charity to help us get through these tough times. I'm running because I don't want my nation to become what this state has become, which is a victim of poor policy and poor execution.
Thank you both. And now we will begin our question and answer period. First question. The federal government has just approved the second round of funding for the CARES Act, which will bring the total amount of this economic stimulus package to more than $2.4 trillion. Despite this infusion of funding, we have more than 16 million unemployed Americans. Is this really the right result for the amount of money we're spending? Given that we're looking to slowly reopen the economy, what should Congress do now, in addition to the CARES Act, to stimulate our economy and get people back to work? Assemblywoman Christy Smith, will begin with you.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. First of all, what I appreciate about this next round of funding that's going out, particularly for those very critical PPP supports to our small business owners is that there are new regulations and guidelines around that. You know, unfortunately, in the first round per capita, California did not get a fair share of those resources. And just last week in a state's budget committee hearing, I asked for what the statewide data is on applications received versus disbursements made. And the ratio there is not favorable, particularly for the business community here in California. So I want to ensure that there remains full transparency in that process, that those dollars go to the grassroots level, to the Main Street businesses as intended, as well as those other mid-sized businesses that are going to need protection. But in terms of what we're going to be able to do to turn this economy back around, it really depends on what the public health infrastructure is to allow us to transition to some people going back to work. And that's heavily reliant, particularly from the perspective of California's 6-point plan, on two things: testing and a public health system that allows us to do some form of contact tracing and isolation if the virus is to flare up in any given area, as we start to release people back into public life and into work. So we are exploring that here in California, working very, very hard on ramping up testing, making sure that we've got the investment there and investment on the public health side. Also making sure that people are much more rapidly qualifying for their unemployment insurance so that those financial resources are available to families to continue spending to support themselves in our economy. And then, you know, moving forward, I think you're going to see a package of economic recovery bills come out of the state legislature if I'm still there in the next couple of weeks when we go back. Looking forward to being a part of that. But the federal response has to remain on getting money and resources back in people's pocket while making sure we've got the public health infrastructure for people to be able to safely return to work.
Assemblywoman Christy Smith, thank you. Now we'll hear from candidate Mike Garcia.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, I think the biggest thing the federal government can do right now is put politics aside, stop with the partisanship and work together. A lot of these bills are getting held up for partisan politics, for pork deals that are getting injected into them at the last minute. Luckily, this $484 billion phase 3.5 was just released. What I'd like to see happen with that money and what the feedback we're getting as I'm plugged into a lot of the local small business owners here, we were very proactive in getting the applications to small businesses throughout the district in Simi Valley, Santa Clarita, and the Antelope Valley, and making sure they understood what each product was, because there was some confusion in the beginning. But the feedback that we're getting is that some of the smaller companies here did not get the help that they needed. So what I'm hoping to see with this $484 billion, and we've been very vocal about this, is that the local banks and local credit unions ensure that the smaller mom and pop shops, small businesses defined as 500 employees or less. So there's quite the spectrum there in terms of size between what I'd call a micro business with 2 to 10 employees who are suffering just as bad as the larger small businesses are. And those are the folks that haven't been getting the help that they need. And those are the folks that are frankly at risk of losing their jobs and the employees. So the priority from the federal government right now needs to make sure that they're working with the states, the governors, to keep us all safe. They need to keep hawking that the infection rate and the line needs to continue to decline. But they also need to look for every opportunity to keep these infusions going into the system and making sure that they're getting to the right folks in a timely fashion. And what we need to really start looking at is driving the unemployment line upwards, or downwards rather, so that people are going back to work as soon as they can in a safe fashion, but in a way that we're still mitigating the risks. But we need lower taxes, we need less red tape, and we need to stop the partisanship bickering, frankly.
Thank you both. And now, Christy Smith, you have opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I would add that the other two key economic components to the next several phases of stimulus that will absolutely have to happen are, first of all, the supports for our nonprofit community. You know, here in California, the nonprofit community is one of our state's biggest employers, and it's not only critical that they be able to support their employees and stay in business as well, but they are providing missing links in that social safety net that people are accessing right now. So whether those are our food banks, our healthcare funding providers, other critical needs that the community has, the nonprofits need to be able to be in line for those resources as well, as do our state small government entities. You know, cities under 500,000 were left out of the first wave of funding. It's incredibly important for small cities like Simi Valley to be able to access those funds to stay operational, because their revenue has diminished as a loss of sales tax revenue really starts to hurt our local communities. So we want to be mindful of that in additional packages going forward.
Thank you very much. Next question. Building transportation infrastructure, such as improvements to I-5, creates living wage jobs and pumps money into the economy, which is much needed right now. As a member of Congress, you will face many issues and opportunities. How much of a priority is transportation in that mix, and what actions will you take to improve mobility, safety, and the movement of goods in your district? Candidate Mike Garcia, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, great question. So we have untapped resources at the federal level that your representative should be bringing into our district to help with our infrastructure, and in particular, the transportation challenges that you talk about. The number one thing we can be doing, though, is to be bringing meaningful jobs into our district, into the Antelope Valley, into the Simi Valley and Santa Clarita Valley, so that we don't have to do the 2-hour commute to get down to West Hollywood or West LA. I've been making that drive myself down to El Segundo as an executive at Raytheon, and it's 2 hours of pain. It takes time off your life. It adds stress, and it's an excess cost. And the fact is that we should be focusing on bringing jobs here. In addition to that, though, we should be expanding the infrastructure. We should be expanding the freeways, adding lanes, adding decks to choke points like the 405 going through the Mulholland Pass and the 118, finishing the sound barrier on the 118 going through Simi Valley, and really making sure that the folks in the Antelope Valley have a safe means of getting through the corridor there to come back downhill to us. So a lot of opportunity to invest in transportation, also a lot of opportunity to invest in water infrastructure. Now's the time to be looking at that when we're not in a drought, frankly. On the backside of the coronavirus, we should be looking at opportunities to improve getting good, clean, safe water to our district so that it's not a concern every time we are in a drought. And the fact that we haven't had a reservoir built since 1978, I believe, is a shame, and that's where the infrastructure really needs to be focused on.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from Assemblywoman Christy Smith.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So we know that the key to regional economic growth will be our ability to expand our infrastructure to meet local demand. And a number of the projects were mentioned by Mike, but expanding the 5 and 14 corridors becomes incredibly important for us as we look to do smart regional planning and not only locate more housing here, but also more job opportunities. And in terms of logistics, we just are not attractive from the perspective of not having that roadway capacity. So we do need to improve there. Additionally, I'm really proud to say we just found out yesterday, after years and years of advocacy by Antelope Valley governments, as well as our own City of Santa Clarita government, funding has been approved for the expansion, improvement, extension of the AV line on the Metro. And that's going to bring huge opportunities for more of our commuters to be able to use mass transit more effectively going into the San Fernando Valley, into the Los Angeles area for work. So that is fantastic news, and huge kudos and congratulations to the City of Santa Clarita on their long-term fight on that. But I am looking forward to going to DC and really being an advocate for this infrastructure funding, because as we come out of this COVID crisis, it is exactly those building jobs that can help ease that transition, provide employment opportunities here, while also creating that future roadmap that we know we want here across the North Valley, North County region. So I also, happen to agree with Mike. Water infrastructure is incredibly important. And the one more thing that I will add on this, that this crisis points out more than anything, is that we also need investment in our hospital infrastructure. We are fortunate here to have Henry Mayo and their recent growth, which they have worked so hard for with the community's investment. But unfortunately, the Antelope Valley still continues to struggle with being able to provide healthcare capacity to everyone in the community, and that hospital continues to struggle there. So we want to see investment in our healthcare infrastructure as well. We want to make sure every hospital can meet the challenge of a future crisis like this.
Thank you. Now, going forward, what I like to do, since you both have been excellent in managing your time, I will not interrupt with the 30-second limit, because you've both just been fantastic. And so I want to give you the opportunity, as you're watching time, obviously, as well, just to be mindful of it. And if we get to the end of the time, then I'll just say time. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Great. Candidate Mike Garcia, you have time for a 1-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, just two key points there on the infrastructure side of the equation. You know, the job force before coronavirus was extremely tight for general contractors and folks in the construction business. So one of the things I'd like to see, and there's a few areas of expertise and industry that we can apply this at, is to have vocational training and some expertise training, apprenticeships for folks in construction, so that someone coming out of high school can get a 6 month to 1 year training course and be able to go into the construction industry and within a couple of years have a management position with you know, 6 digits type salary. There's a lot of opportunity there. You know, that applies to aerospace, that applies to Hollywood production as well. So that's something from a federal level we should be chasing money to invest in our local junior colleges and COC to help us out. The second part of that conversation, though, I think it's critical to not put the burden of these investments on taxpayers right now. We cannot afford another dime in higher taxes. We've been operating with a surplus here in California for $22 billion a year, and they keep dialing taxes up on us. So don't raise taxes, just raise the standards of those who are executing our funds. And, you know, unfortunately, Christy has supported about $3 billion of those increases.
Thank you. Thank you. Now for the next question, which is a follow-up to this. Do you both see an alternative method to federal and state gas taxes to fund our current and future transportation needs? Assemblywoman Christy Smith, we'll start with you. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, certainly. I would be looking for efficiencies in the federal budget. I mean, you know, every once in a while you see these reports of outdated programs that are part of the federal bureaucracy in every department and every agency. There are a lot of savings to be captured there with funds that go to outdated programming, everything from research whose time has come and gone to programming that's not as effective as it could be anymore. So I think there are savings there that could be invested in infrastructure. And I also think that, you know, a budget is a statement of our priorities, and coming out of this crisis, where we're going to allocate resources is really going to be a huge value statement for our priorities as Americans. And if we put jobs growth first and set some other things in the budget aside for a while, that's going to be very telling and meaningful. But, you know, so the interesting thing is that I used to be a Republican, and when I was, we believed in things like balanced budgets. So I'm proud as an elected official here locally to have served, worked 9 years on a school board. You've got to project a solvent budget 3 years out. And in the state of California, where we have a balanced budget requirement, and not only do we have that, but we now have this rainy day savings that's going to get us through this really critical moment in our state's history, because we have that savings put aside. So, you know, I think a lot of times we've got to be very forward looking with our federal spending to acknowledge that recent tax cuts, which unfortunately were increases for a lot of Californians, have meant that we've just got less room to maneuver in that federal budget in some respects as well. And we've got a higher debt and deficit to show for it.
Thank you so much. Now we'll hear from candidate Mike Garcia.
Yeah, let's be clear on a few things there. First of all, we have a surplus and we have this rainy day fund because the state of California, Sacramento, Christy Smith, and the rest of the folks up there have overtaxed us. I'd like to see what they're going to do with that rainy day fund and how that comes back to the average taxpayer, the small business owner, so we can get jobs going again. The alternative to the gas tax, and unfortunately the gas tax was passed and then there was no support out of politicians, especially out of Christy Smith and her team, to revoke the gas tax. That's a backbreaker for us. The fact that oil is at a record low right now and we still have $3 a gallon gas is a shame. It's a symptom of bad management here in California. The alternative ways to fund infrastructure come from cutting the fat, looking at every line item in our revenue and in our expenditures and figuring out the efficiencies. This is a skill set that comes with having run a business, having been accountable for profit and loss in a big business, and making sure that we make ends meet without the help of the taxpayers bailing us out every time. We need to hold them accountable, kill the bullet train, use the funding from the bullet train to expand our freeways here locally and up and down the coast in California.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Christy Smith, you have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Sure. Well, just for clarity, I was a school board member when the gas tax was passed. I was not in the legislature. And in terms of its repeal, that statement was made loud and clear by the voters of California, who said they want investment in infrastructure and supported on an ongoing increase in the gas revenue. So that's been asked and answered. Californians want better transportation in the state, and they're willing to step up and pay for it. And secondarily, in terms of where these reserves and resources are going to go, I'm going to tell you where they're going to go. They're going to save the jobs of our frontline workers right now, like firefighters and law enforcement and teachers, because that's all funded out of our state's budget. So we want to make sure that as we roll out the rest of the spending on the COVID crisis, which right now is costing California about $7 billion, that we also factor in the fact that we might see reduced revenues in 1 or 2 more out years. And that rainy day fund is going to be just enough to get us through without draconian cuts to essential services that we all value as Californians.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to the CARES Act and disaster relief for this next question. Many small businesses are hurting today because they did not receive disaster relief from the Small Business Administration, nor were they able to access a loan through the Paycheck Protection Program or related public and private funding options that's supposed to target small businesses. The larger companies that applied received a significant amount of the financial assistance, while many small businesses that desperately needed help, they received nothing. What can be done in the future to ensure a more equitable distribution of disaster funding for our small businesses? We will hear first from candidate Mike Garcia. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'd say first of all, the first thing that this state should be doing right now to help those small business owners is the thing that was actually breaking their back the hardest before the coronavirus, which was AB 5. Measures like that were pulled apart, and they were the first levers to be pulled at the federal level. We need to be lowering taxes. We need to be lowering regulation. We need to make it easier right now for the gig economy to restart, to have independent contractors be able to go to work in whatever capacity they can during the stay-at-home. And then to have the small business owners be able to leverage that workforce to the max extent possible without all of the red tape and high costs. So turn off AB 5 right now. There's no point. Everyone has conceded that it's a bad bill. It needs a lot of work. It's being amended with so many carve-outs that at this point it's all a facade. Let's stop AB 5. That's thing one. In the future, to help the money get to the right places and to include getting to the small, I'll call it less than 50 to 100 employee small businesses, let's have that money flow through chambers. Let's have that money flow through local city councils so that there is no for-profit considerations there. The banks are doing a decent job of getting the money to the bigger companies right now, but frankly, they're not incentivized to create higher volume of loan applications and to approve those and to get those checks cut to the small businesses. So do it through a lower level government entity that has no dog in the fight for profit, and they're just looking out for the interest of their community. They know which businesses need it the most, and they can do a fair and equitable job of making sure that some of these companies that are very solvent, that have existing lines of credit, don't also get the money from the federal government while the rest of us are starving.
Thank you. And now we will hear from Assemblywoman Christy Smith. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I think it's essential that the regulations, as each new wave of federal support rolls out, are very clear in where this funding and this resource should go. And I think there needs to be some examination made as whether we are better off as having these being direct grants right out of the federal government rather than the pass-through to banks, because at the end of the day, the banks are going to be the ones that win, although they're in a very unenviable position right now of trying to administer this program without nearly enough resource. But I'm glad we have the opportunity to talk about AB 5 because there's been so much misinformation about this. And the Santa Clarita Chamber and I, we go way back on this. From the time I took office, we all sat in that room and talked about the implications of the Dynamex decision and what it could potentially mean. But what we know about worker misclassification, which is what AB 5 addresses, is that when a worker is misclassified, it costs both the state and the federal government a tremendous amount of money. And the money that it costs doesn't go to very critical programs that we are trying to utilize in this exact moment, like our state's unemployment insurance. And so when workers are misclassified, they're looped out of that system. There's several things they're not paying very often. And that's their unemployment insurance, They're not paying into Medicare and Social Security. And so in the end, that costs us all, those who do pay into that system. And not that I'm not grateful in this moment that we have that to be able to support those workers. But there's also nothing that prevents an independent contractor from being at work right now if they're in an industry that is essential and they can do that work. It's also worth noting that the CARES Act, because of Democratic advocacy, also includes pandemic unemployment assistance exactly for those employees who have been historically misclassified and find themselves without employment right now. They are able to now apply starting April 28th in the state of California to receive those services and benefits. And one final note about AB5 as it relates to the business community is that, you know, here in Santa Clarita and Simi Valley and the Antelope Valley, we've got a lot of great businesses that play by the rules. They classify their employees appropriately, whether it's part-time or full-time work. They're doing all the right things. They're paying into that system, but they create an unfair system of competition when there isn't compliance. Because a contractor who doesn't comply comes in and can underbid, and it's an unfair competition environment.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike, we're going to give you 1 minute to candidate Mike Garcia. You have 1 minute to do your rebuttal.
You can call me Mike. That's fine, Jeffrey. By the way, all 700,000 folks in the district can call me Mike, even after I'm elected. So, you know, here's the bottom line, right? Christy talks about the misclassification being extremely expensive. What's extremely expensive is the $70,000 jobs that we have lost as a result of AB5 since it's been started, and that's going to continue to get worse, especially right now. Okay, AB5 is like putting a dagger into the heart of the economy while it's in life support right now, and it absolutely just needs to be hit pause. If you don't want to revoke it, hit pause for right now, so at least we can continue to survive. You know, the fact is that all of these little carve outs, when they talk about transitioning, and Christy has done this as well, transitioning certain businesses from a pre-AB5 to a post-AB5 environment, the California government ends up throwing $20 to $30 million of our taxpayer money to those industries to help them out. So it ends up costing us way more than the cost avoidance that they were hoping to get out of the AB5. The bottom line is that the federal government already defines what an independent contractor versus an employee looks like. Businesses need to adhere to that guideline and do the right thing and hold them accountable.
Thank you, Candidate Mike Garcia. Thank you very much. Okay, next question. What outreach have you done or will be willing to do for specifically Latino small businesses in terms of outreach to make them aware of the resources that are available to them? Assemblywoman Christy Smith, you have this question first.
Well, thank you. I think in terms of reaching out to the Latino business community, it's making sure that they also receive the huge volume of information that's out there right now in terms of current supports. And very proud to say in the state of California, we've also carved out specifically through an executive order by the governor, a business support system that goes to minority-owned businesses, specifically in lower income communities. And so I'd be happy through my office right now to connect people to those resources. But that should be a matter of common practice. And I really appreciate the fact that, you know, our Chamber of Commerce here, as well as our allies in the Antelope and Simi Valleys, have embraced, you know, their own Latino chambers and making sure that they feel welcome, have a place to participate, but also understanding that sometimes the environments that those businesses operate in is a little bit different than the standard, and we want to make sure that we're supporting them, that they do have access to good supportive banking, that they've got marketing tools that they need, that they also have you know, what they need to keep their employees going and bring them back as we start to recover from this crisis. So again, very proud to see the leadership we've done in California. I'd like to see a similar model to that happen at the federal level, where we are acknowledging that across minority communities, and particularly in urban environments where we have minority-owned businesses, that they do require that extra support.
Thank you so much. Now we'll hear from candidate Mike Garcia.
Yeah, I kind of resent that last statement that we require extra support. Look, for me, it's not an outreach. I am a Latino. I am a small business owner. I'm a first-generation American, and you know, my grandfather came here with my father, started in the construction business, ended up starting his own business and was very successful at that. And that's where we learned our discipline as kids. Like I said, it's not an outreach. We're all Americans, and that's the bottom line. The Latino community and the Hispanic community, what I take pride in is the discipline, the hard work. The only thing we ask for is equal access, equal opportunity. Those laws do exist already. As your member of Congress, I'll make sure that we keep all elements of our population and our society up to speed on all of the things that can benefit us across the board, whether it's the Asians, a business community, the Latino business community, white, black, any religion, creed, or sexual preference. We are all entitled to the same access and the same opportunities. So you have my commitment as your representative in DC that I'll look out for all of us.
All right. Assemblywoman Christy Smith, you have 1 minute for rebuttal.
Sure. I would just say that while theoretically everyone has that equal access, unfortunately, it's still just not the case, particularly for first generation Americans, recent immigrants, and people who are coming here to start a business, and in heavily minority communities. There is still limited access to a full range of banking services, to lending, and to the kind of supportive generation of resources that you do see in other more affluent communities. I mean, it's just a matter of fact, and it's something we still need to continue to address to make sure that everybody's having that opportunity at the American dream.
Thank you so much. Next question. The Santa Clarita Valley prides itself on being a business-friendly community. If elected, what is one action you will take to ensure it remains that way? Candidate Mike Garcia, we'll hear from you first.
There's a lot of things that can be done at the federal level to ensure we continue to continue to succeed in this valley. First of all, my hat's off to the Santa Clarita City Council, the mayor, the leadership over the last call it 35 years. Phenomenal job in leading this city through the ups and downs. It's a well-managed city. Okay, it is a beacon of hope in a state where we are very thirsty for people who understand how to develop, who understand how to balance budgets and spend the money in a very responsible manner and get a great product. I mean, when you look at our valley, Santa Clarita is a fantastic city because of the hard work that our founding fathers and mothers in this district have started. So kudos to them. From a federal level, though, what we need to do is ensure that the tax cuts from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are made permanent. Those are coming up for a revote here in the next couple of years. They were not permanent in the first place. There's some things that can be negotiated for a better deal here for us as Californians, and that includes removing the $10,000 state and local tax deduction limit. We need to get that removed, but we need to make the tax cuts permanent. That was the catalyst and the fuel that started this booming economy that is now the best economy before the coronavirus that this world has ever seen. So we need to make sure that we're lowering taxes, keeping taxes low, removing the SALT cap limit. And then another major piece of this economy, it's the backbone of our district's economy, both in Antelope Valley, Santa Clarita, but also in Simi Valley, is the aerospace business. And continuing to invest in the military, to continuing to invest in the high-end jobs, the low-end jobs, and all of the technology that comes with providing our military and our frontline warfighters better technology is a huge benefit, a financial benefit to Santa Clarita, and we need to double down on that. I've been in that industry now for 11 years. I understand what the requirements are, where all the opportunities are. We can bring a lot of aerospace into our district with the new Space Force being stood up. I understand that industry like no one else in the area.
Thank you, candidate Mike Garcia. And now we will hear from Assemblywoman Christy Smith.
Well, thank you. So my commitment to you remains the same as what it's been as your state legislator. I've been very proud that one of the initial advisory committees that I set up in my state legislative service has been a business advisory committee, and some of you as chamber members participate in that, and I am grateful for that. So it's going to be extending that outreach now to also include the Antelope Valley, so that everyone at the table, so we're having meaningful conversations about everything from capital investment to accessing capital to the local infrastructure needs. It all becomes one kind of common conversation when it comes to good economic development across a region. And one of my biggest concerns, though, has been that I think with the right kind of investment here, and that is in infrastructure, some additional investment in our education system at both the college level and the high school level, we really can continue to have this kind of great vertically articulated jobs training system, and I want to see us continue to do that. But we also have to marry that with really meaningful and thoughtful economic development planning. And our own Economic Development Corporation here has led the way on that in partnership with the college. And so we need to continue to build on that model, to look for industries that we want to continue to attract, to build on the ones that we already have, and make sure that we are ready for what now is an every 5 to 10 year generational cycle in what the next new technology and jobs front is. So I'm committed to engaging the business community in that work with me, then how we tie that to the resources that could be brought to bear from the federal government level to make sure that we just continue to move and grow here.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Christy Smith. And now we'll hear from candidate Mike Garcia, who has a 1-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I think, even though this is a federal level position, I think one of the requirements and responsibilities of this job is to continue to shine a very bright light on all of the challenges that our local businesses have, regardless of what level of government it's at. If it's the federal level, that's interesting. I will fight for us on that front. But if it's at the state level, I'll continue to message. And I do understand that the AB5 bill is not a federal bill. I get that. But we need to really make sure and educate our population, especially here in the Santa Clarita Valley, what AB5 is, the value that it could bring if we were to just kill it, get rid of it. And that will do a tremendous job in bringing more jobs back here to Santa Clarita in a very timely fashion, especially in this coronavirus era. Also shining a light on the fact that while we're the 5th largest GDP and we have some of the highest tax revenue in the nation, perhaps in the world, we still have very poor infrastructure, poor education systems. We have great schools here in the Santa Clarita that we're grateful for, but that's not true in all of California in our district either. So holding local politicians accountable, holding Sacramento accountable, and really taking all of the governors off of this economy so that they can operate freely and grow is a key.
Thank you both. Next question. Young
Do
professionals.
I get a rebuttal on that, Jeffrey?
Yes, you do. I'm sorry. Assemblywoman Christy Smith, thank you. You have a 1-minute rebuttal. Thank you.
Yeah, not to worry. I mean, I appreciate that. And I think one of the things that Mike alluded to but didn't quite get there is that even though we are the 5th largest global economy in the world, we still see persistent poverty here. And part of the reason we see persistent poverty is unemployment, underemployment, and misclassification. When workers are in jobs where they pay a decent wage, a wage that can put a roof over a head and put food on the table, that is a greater contributor to the economy. When they are misclassified, when they are paid independently, when they are paid an hourly wage below what they should be because they're left out of those important job protections, it damages the economy overall. And so, and I have to reemphasize this. At the time that vote was taken on AB5 in the California State Legislature, the Chamber of Commerce had gone to neutral. We all worked very hard together with the Chamber, with state business entities on getting this right measure of carve out for the industries that would have been impacted negatively based on the Dynamex decision. And had Dynamex continued, we would have seen a lot of misclassification. But California is doing okay. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. We led the economic recovery out of the Great Recession, and we still have more angel investment, more entrepreneurship here in California than any other state of the nation. So now it's just a matter of us right sizing to make sure that those lower tier minimum wage employees continue to have greater opportunity.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Christy Smith. Next question. This involves millennials. Young professionals today are struggling with purchasing a house. What would be your top solution in tackling the housing crisis they are facing? We'll hear first from candidate Mike Garcia.
Yeah, and this is a business that I'm very familiar with. I've been a private real estate investor with a sole proprietorship LLC that I've been leading for the last few years here. I've purchased low-income housing. I've provided low-income housing for folks up and down California, and especially here in the Santa Clarita Valley. Look, the challenge right now is that the cost to build low-income housing right now in California makes it almost impossible to actually yield a unit that is something that the average college student or millennial can afford. Even 2 millennials who are married with good jobs right now are having a hard time finding a home that's less than $500,000. That's not because necessarily of the California market. That's because before you even put a shovel in the ground in California, the amount of regulations and red tape needed to do that, to get the permits, to get the licensing, the delays, the ownership of the land before you can build, adds up to about $250,000 for just a single family home right there. So you do a deep dive into all the regulations that these developers are looking for, and when they land on the fact that after they make their investments, they end up with a $500,000 unit that no one's going to be able to afford, they decide not to invest in that development. And that's one of the major issues. I understand, Christy's saying California is doing fine. We're not doing fine. We have a lot of challenges. The fact that a millennial family of 2 with good jobs can't buy a house right now is not fine. I'm not okay with that. We need to figure out how to cut the red tape, lower taxes, and make sure that we can afford to continue to live in this state. We're getting we're getting taxed like no one's business right now across the board, and frankly, the opportunities aren't here. That's why we're seeing record numbers of families leaving this state for states like Texas and Idaho and Arizona right now. Things aren't fine.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Assemblywoman Christy Smith.
Sure. I mean, anybody watching California and frankly across the country knows that housing is one of our greatest challenges right now. So I happen to be an advocate, particularly when it comes to our homeless situation, that we treat that as what it is right now, which is a refugee crisis. And so I'm glad during this COVID moment that we are looking at it from that perspective and trying to keep public health safe by providing shelter for the homeless population. But when it comes to building and addressing the state's considerable housing shortage, there's a lot I agree with Mike. Most of this comes down to the buy-in entitlements, that before you even break ground in California, you're looking at a 6-figure investment as a real estate investor. We also have to acknowledge that a lot of us, particularly in communities like here in Santa Clarita, where we like to have our home and a yard, that the new model that millennials might face in their lifetime if they stay in California is simply more density. And there are a lot of communities that have struggled with that. What is that right size, building model of density and mixed use tied together? We have a local project here, Vista Canyon, which I think is going to serve as a great roadmap for how we do that locally. It's got that equal part of public transportation. It's got density. It's easily accessible. It's near a growth area of the community. I think we're going to need to see more of that right size, smart urban planning. But also in terms of, the investment, we've got to be reasonable and think about what has the most bang for the buck in terms of that buy-in and the development, again, before a house even breaks ground, and then be willing possibly to set some of that aside as a state. Let's not eliminate the environmental protections, but let's recognize that we might need to do some kind of, state investment, state buy down in order to get affordable housing on the books to make it enticing for builders. I mean, I appreciate that Mike is in this business. I've talked to a number of developers myself. It simply doesn't pencil out for them in California right now. And we've got to figure out that equation and how we make that work, whether it's access to surplus government land. And that's something I've been working on with Senator Bob Hertzberg from the Valley. But we actually do have to do some significant work here on housing availability. It's a supply problem. It's a buy-in problem. And then it's how do we master having communities like we all enjoy and benefit from here, but also have enough density to reach the numbers we need to hit in terms of housing availability.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Christy Smith. And now we'll hear from candidate Mike Garcia with a 1-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, just real quick on the homeless topic there. It's not a lack of housing necessarily that's causing this homeless problem. It's things like AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57, terrible legislation, lack of law enforcement or lack of enforcement of the laws. The law enforcement is actually doing a good job of what they can do underneath these principles and guidelines that are coming out of Sacramento. The housing crisis is being driven by a mental health challenge that we're putting our heads in the sand about. We're not paying for, and this is something at a federal level I will chase, is funding for mental health facilities to help the homeless get better, to get treatments and make sure that they're not just recycling through the streets. Same thing with drug addiction. There are no teeth left in the laws in California that force folks who are committing crimes to get rehab for drug abuse and drug addiction. They're just getting, again, recycled through the system. It's costing us billions of dollars. If you want to talk about building homes here and keeping things as affordable as it can be, the last thing you want to do is go after Prop 13, which is why a lot of folks, including a lot of my family members, are still able to live here. Prop 13 grandfathered in the lower property taxes. And again, Christy Smith and the rest of the Dems up in Sacramento continue to fight this Prop 13 and to challenge it to chip away at it, whether it's for residential or for commercial purposes. These are the opposite of things that we should be doing to help the housing crisis and affordability problems.
Thank you, Candidate Mike Garcia. Thank you very much. Now we've come to the final question.
Do I get a rebuttal on that one, Jeffrey?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry, Assemblywoman Christy Smith. Forgive me. Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
Actually,
Thank you. I want to be very, I want to be,
on that one. Then. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, Christy. Go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
excuse me, just a second. On this particular question, I believe that this
oh,
was.
that's right, you did. Yeah, that's right. Mike,
Go ahead. No,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I
No,
should.
no.
Go ahead, Christy.
Yes,
No,
because
let's stick to the rules, Mike. You're right. You went first on that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're all good. No worries. Now we've come to the final question. And it says, assuming you win the special as well as the general election, what is the one single thing you want to have accomplished during your full 2-year term? And Assemblywoman Christy Smith, we will start with you. 2 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a very thoughtful question. And I think given the moment that we're in, the single most important thing is, first of all, we're going to restore America's health. And we're going to make sure that everybody gets to the other side of this crisis, that going forward, we have put funding and resources into every aspect of our government's health delivery system to ensure that we're ready to stand up against a pandemic like this again in the future. But we want everybody healthy. We want to have developed therapeutics for this crisis, and we want to have developed a vaccine. Secondarily, I want to make sure that we have got all of the economic infrastructure and support in place for America to fully recover and get back on their feet financially. And so that's going to mean infrastructure investment, which creates jobs. It's going to be continuing to help make people whole for the time being that they need it for the income that they've lost. And then doing everything that we can to create a productive and robust business environment to get us solidly back on the road to economic recovery sooner rather than later. I think that's going to be the primary focus of both state legislatures and certainly the federal legislature as we come out of this for the next 2 years.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Christy Smith. And now we'll hear from candidate Mike Garcia. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to leading and being a part of the solution and not part of the problem in Washington, D.C. to bring a level of bipartisan support to make sure that we're bringing answers, especially in this time of need. As we get through the coronavirus, and we will, watching the economy grow as a businessman, as someone who understands national security and national security policy, making sure that we remain the preeminent superpower in the entire world. China and Russia right now are not near peer threats. They are peer threats, and they do represent a threat. We need to take care of ourselves through Corona. We need to take care of ourselves on the international stage, keep us all safe. I think the thing that I would like to accomplish and hopefully be successful is bring results. No drama, just results. Allow the constituents of the 25th district to once again take pride in their representative in Congress. This is the land of Buck McKeon and Steve Knight. We deserve to be represented by someone who's going to bring dignity to the office, a level of intelligence and experience in the business world, in the military world, and also someone who's doing it as a patriot. I'm doing this as a citizen legislator, giving up my job to serve. Once again, giving up my job and making sure that the direction we're heading in as a nation is a very positive and successful one, and that's why I'm doing it.
Thank you so much. And now we'll have a rebuttal by Assemblywoman Christy Smith.
Sure, no qualms with that. I mean, I think we're on the same page. We're going to be in a unique position in the next 2 years to have a significant need to set partisanship aside and focus on what's best for the recovery of the country. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Well, that concludes our question and answer period. And thank you for just doing an excellent job and staying with time. And as we go into the next phase, it calls for concluding remarks from both of you, 2 minutes each. And we're going to start with candidate Mike Garcia, and he will be followed by Assemblywoman Christy Smith. Candidate Mike Garcia, you may begin.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you all for participating in this. Hopefully the takeaway from this is that we can be on completely different sides of the equation in terms of politics and policy, but we can have civil conversations and civil discourse throughout this. So I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this. Like I said in the beginning, this is of terrible importance right now. We need to really focus on the candidates, really focus on the fiber, the experience, the education, the why they're running, what they represent in terms of values, but also potential for growth in the future. I think you can frankly drive a truck between Christy Smith and I in terms of tax policies. I'm for low tax. I'm pro-growth, pro-business, pro-taxpayer. I think the Howard Jarvis Tax Association gave Christy, unfortunately, a rating of D. These are bad things to be pushing right now in a moment where we need to grow and get better. I love California. I love this state. I want to stay here. I want my kids to be able to grow up and raise their kids here as well. It's the unintended consequences of bad policy that have led us down to a path where we're underperforming, frankly, for who we are and for the potential that we have. And the bottom line is that for 244 years, this nation has been the best country in the world, and we've been through tough times before. We'll get through this, but we've survived and we thrived because the right people showed up at the right time to do the right thing and for the right reasons. And I am completely honored to be in this position to represent this district, a beautiful district. We deserve the best, and I look forward to serving with pride and dignity, without drama, just results.
Thank you, candidate Mike Garcia. And now we will hear from Assemblywoman Christy Smith.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you to all of you who tuned in today and for taking this time to invest in the future of this district and of our country. It's meaningful, I'm sure, to both Mike and myself. When it comes to results, I will say I've got 10 years of proven results in this community. Very effectively helped to steward a school district through the worst economic times and continued to great success to hold on to jobs and to be a top performing school district along with all of our other school districts in the community. We are part of a really wonderful and robust community. Everything from our city level government here to our robust nonprofit community makes this part of California a wonderful place to live. I would still posture that given its balanced budget, its healthy rainy day surplus right now that's going to help us through this crisis, California is managing things very, very well. I think a lot has been said about my position on taxes. I will say that you can accidentally sneeze and have it sound like the word tax, and Howard Jarvis is going to give you a D. And there are a number of things that I think my opponent would point to that could very easily be explained away as continuations of important systems that help us maintain services to you, the taxpayer in this state and in this country, and to the solvency of the state of California, which we've achieved, where we allow people here to retire with dignity when they've been an employee of the state, where we support the things that are important, like schools, like law enforcement, and we're going to continue to do that. But my commitment to you remains the same as it has always been. Everyone gets a seat at the table. This leadership is about all of us having collective conversations about what this roadmap needs to look like across this district. But I've been on the other side of a hiring table before in crucial moments like this. And I always want to choose the employee with the most relevant direct experience. I have 10 years of elected public experience with balanced budgets, with effective policy, with systemic support for every part of our economy, and a whole number and a host of issues that we haven't talked about here, like women's reproductive freedom and equal rights for minority communities, and how we evolve in a community going forward. Protection for victims' rights, homeowners protection, real investment, real results in investment in resources in this community, which I've brought back to the table. I plan to go to Washington, D.C. to leverage relationships that I already have there with huge numbers of the California congressional delegation, as well as the very robust support I enjoy from my colleagues here in California and every one of our county officials, except for Catherine, who I appreciate her, and I think she's doing phenomenal work and hasn't weighed in on this race, as well as
Thank you.
Every state constitutional officer. So I thank you and look forward to serving you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Christy Smith. Thank you, candidate Mike Garcia. And thank all of you for tuning in. I'm going to call for John Musella at this time.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff. On behalf of the SCV Chamber, we want to thank you all for joining us and thank both candidates for being here. As a reminder, this is a vote by mail election only. All ballots are being mailed, so please remember to postmark your ballot by Election Day, Tuesday, May 12th. We look forward to seeing you all on one of our mini webinars, including our upcoming Back to Business webinar series. Please stay safe and healthy. Remember to wear a face covering when you're out, and please keep practicing social distancing. Thank you all and be well.